So you need English for work. Maybe because you work at an international company, or maybe because you're living abroad and English is the main language of communication. However, at this point, you understand everything. You understand almost everything that happens in meeting rooms, or maybe you understand conversations that happen between your colleagues, and you can even watch a lot of English movies or videos without subtitles. However, when comes a time where you actually have to speak English, you blank out. And at this point, you're super frustrated because you have done so much to improve your English, but you still feel stuck. You've taken all the necessary exams. You have taken a lot of courses, both online and offline, and you have followed so many YouTube channels and watched all the videos that need to be watched, but still, all of these effort don't seem to translate into improving your speaking skills. Or maybe it does. Maybe sometimes you're at a situation where you speak quite fluently, pretty confidently about simple things, But other times, especially during high pressure, high stakes situations, you often find yourself blank. The reason is not about not knowing enough words or not knowing enough English. It's not always that. It could very much be your mindset. So I want to talk about the 3 blocks that could actually explain why you blank out when you have to speak English, especially in a high stakes situation. So the first one is knowledge gap, 2 is language gap, and 3 it's psychological gap. So let's talk about it one by one. So for the first block, knowledge gap, it could be because you may not know the subject well enough to speak about it confidently. An easy way to know if this may be the reason is ask yourself, if I were to talk about this in my native language or any language that you feel most comfortable with, would I be able to talk about this clearly and effectively? Do I actually know about this topic well enough? Language gap, this could mean that you actually know the knowledge well enough. You're able to talk about this in your native language, but you don't know the words, the terminology, the phrases that you need to talk about this in English. And the last one, psychological gap. So let's say you actually do have the subject knowledge. You're able to explain this topic clearly in your native language and in English. In that case, it's not the language gap, but it could just be your own mind that is blocking you from speaking about this confidently. Or maybe you already have a story that you tell about yourself that makes it harder for you to talk about this naturally and confidently and easily. So let me know in the comments down below, when you're having difficulties to speak in a high-stakes situation, what is the most common reason? Oftentimes, is it subject knowledge? Is it the language itself? Or is it your own mind that is preventing you from speaking? So now I want to talk about simple ways that you can do to fix each of these gaps. So let's talk about the first gap, and that is the knowledge gap. So the one way to fix this is actually very simple. If you feel like you're blanking out and you don't know what to say, it could be because you don't know it well enough. So what you need to do is to watch a lot of videos, books, or articles about this subject. You first need to understand the main points, the concepts, before you tell them what this is all about. What are the best practices? Because if you truly understand it, even if you don't have all the fancy words to talk about this like a native would, you would still be able to get your points across if you really know your subject. Or also, the more videos or audio or books that you consume, you will naturally start to pick up some of the terminology and the phrases that you can use to talk about the subject, which then leads me to the second gap, which is the language gap. And now let's talk about how we can close the language gap. So the thing that you can do is very similar to what you should do in the first gap, in the knowledge gap. But at this point, once you've already consumed a lot of content, videos, podcasts about a certain topic, about a certain subject, right now what you need to do is still do that, expose yourself to a lot of this content, but now instead of consuming them with the intention of learning about the subject, your intention should be about improving your vocabulary. Increase your vocabulary, focus on how native speakers would use certain phrases or words or the kind of grammar that they use. Focus on this. When you already understand the subject, now it's a lot easier for you to focus on the words. And this is how we can close the language gap. For instance, let's say you're in a conversation with a teammate, a colleague from the finance team, and let's say you're trying to share with her what are some of the best social media practices this year. And you want to share with her that some of the best practices is to focus more on authenticity, on some behind the scenes storytelling, instead of a more polished content. That's what you would like to share. And then you're thinking to yourself, I don't know enough words or sentences to convey this message in English. What do you do? So what you can do is to find a text on the internet. Either it could be from YouTube videos, articles or blogs, or you can simply ask ChatGPT. So just as an example, I got my text from ChatGPT and it says this. So one of the biggest shifts this year has been the focus on authenticity. Audiences are tired of overly polished, salesy content. What's working really well right now is showing behind the scenes clips, being transparent, and actually connecting with your audience in a more human way. Let's say you want to say that, you want to convey this message. So once you get this text and then you truly understand it, you're going to read it again. You're going to pay attention to the words and phrases that they use to convey a certain idea, a certain concept. The biggest shift. Audiences are tired of overly polished, salesy content. In your head, you understand what salesy content is like, or content that is too overproduced. And now from this text, you've already learned a word, overly polished. What's working really well right now? Behind the scenes clips, being transparent, connecting with your audience. This is also a terminology that is used so much in marketing, whether it's social media marketing or just digital marketing, a more human way. Connecting in a more human way. So from this small text, you already collected about 5-6 new terms that you can already add to your vocabulary. So this is the most efficient way you can improve your vocabulary for work purposes in a short time. Now we move on to the third gap, which is the mental gap or the psychological gap. So let's say you're an expert in your field. You've collected all of the right terminology and phrases and words to explain to other people certain concepts about your subject. But for some reason, despite knowing your subject very well, despite knowing all the words and the phrases that you need to use to explain certain concepts, it still just doesn't come out. This reason might be because of pressure. And pressure could come from different sources. It could be that you're putting pressure on yourself, telling yourself that you have to sound perfect, you have to use the right words, you have to sound competent and credible. Or it could be pressure given by external sources. It could be that it's a situation that is very risky, a lot of these important people are watching you, or maybe the other person does not make you feel comfortable, makes you feel a little judged. All of these play a part into how comfortable you feel in a conversation. So at this point, what you need to do is to first take a deep breath. When your mind starts spiraling, always come back to yourself. Take a deep breath in, inhale, and then exhale. And this is probably the easiest and the fastest way for you to calm yourself down. And now, when you actually have to speak out loud, what you need to do is to lower the pressure for yourself. So instead of telling yourself, I need to be perfect, this, and that, it's counterproductive. Giving yourself too much pressure is going to make yourself feel even more nervous. And then when you're nervous, words just don't come out. When you feel nervous and feeling a lot more pressure, parts of your brain that is responsible to produce language is shut down. And instead of focusing on having to sound perfect, being in this performative mode, you need to get yourself into a communicative mode. How can I communicate this in a clear way? So instead of thinking, how can I sound perfect? How can I be clear in my message? And instead of focusing on yourself, focus on the conversation, focus on the message. So you need to make that shift from self-focus to conversation focus. This is one way for you to lower the pressure. And if you're in a situation where the source of pressure is external, then we're going to leave that for another video because it's been long. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and I will see you in another video. Bye.